Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Tom Nevers Treatment Public Outreach. This has been a community organized event. My name is Cheryl Emery. I'm the chair of Nantucket Park and Recreation Commission, but I'm here today as a citizen who's concerned about our parks. Today's format will consist of a presentation by Elizabeth O'Rourke and her team. She is a 20-year resident of Tom Nevers. Elizabeth is a landscape architect of Nantucket. Her company is Jardin International. Did I say right? Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth, for donating your time and your energy and expertise to this project. Following the presentation, we will open the floor out to you for your concerns and comments and suggestions. And finally, we will hear from Rich Turr from Nantucket Community Park and Recreation, Nantucket CPR, how you can help. I'd like to introduce them. Thank you, Sarah.
Good morning. So there's a few new faces today that we didn't see at the last meeting, and then we have a few that we already saw once. So as co-creator of the Nantucket Music Festival a few years back, Cheryl became cognizant of the state of disrepair that the Tom Nevers Field had fallen into. And she's concerned about that. After all, healthy parks make for markers of a healthy community. Children play together, families spend time together, people of different ages come to recreate and relax. They add security and value to the neighborhood. Conversely, neglected park, open space, recreation facility that are poorly managed have the opposite effect. Thus, small children stay away and the parents, illicit activities begin to proliferate. It becomes a dangerous place and people stay away and the value deteriorates. So being aware of the state of disrepair that Tom Nevers Field had fallen into, Cheryl reached out and asked if I'd be interested in working together on creating a master plan. At the same time she was reaching out with this request, Maya Kozolak, who's a 10th-generation Nantucket native and also a landscape architecture student at UC Berkeley, was inquiring about interning with us for the summer. So I proposed to her working on this park, and this is a field that really interests her, so she readily agreed. So for the duration of the summer, since late May, we've put an effort into creating kind of a concept plan, but we did a thorough site analysis and we just organized the information that we found. And that's what we want to present to you today. So the presentation is going to be the geolocation, a little bit of the history about Tom Nevers, past and current usage, a thorough site analysis, a conceptual sort of loose master plan for improvement, and then phasing, goals and phasing of the project. Our goals are as follows: is caring for the space that we own as a community, provide a beautiful and safe place to enjoy recreation, and create a general master plan that makes sense with the resource at hand and that will benefit our community as a whole. So with this,
thank you, Elizabeth. So I apologize to anyone who was here last time. It's ultimately the same presentation. We have a few additions, but I provided everyone with a packet to follow along with this exact presentation. So this cover page is the worst part of erosion on the island. I mean, not on the island, on this site. And it rightly sets the tone for this whole site analysis that we're about to go through. Page of contents. So I just want to start with some context. Tom Nevers Field is located in the southeast quarter of Nantucket, and more specifically off of Milestone Road at the end of Tom Nevers Road, next to the ocean. This is an existing site plan of Tom Nevers as the 21 acres as it exists today. For some orientation, Tom Nevers Road entrance is to the east. The baseball and softball fields are to the north of the site with the ocean to the south. This is a general timeline of significant moments in the history of Tom Nevers. I'm going to highlight some key points that are relevant to what we are doing today. So in 1954, the Navy purchased the land for oceanographic research, mapping the ocean floor and as a target range practice location. In 1978, the Tom Nevers Civic Association was created. In 1980, town purchased the property back. In 1995, a Tom Nevers reuse plan was proposed by Horiuchi and Solian Landscape Architects. In 2010, the government began an investigation into leftover ammunition and hazardous material in the greater Tom Nevers region. In 2015, the government concluded its cleanup for leftover ammunition. So over 900 rocket shells and pieces of shrapnel were recovered. Not one of the collected items posed potential threat to explode, nor did they contain any hazardous material inside of them. This does not mean there are no potentially explosive ammunition shells left in the area, though it does lower the chance significantly. So presently, Tom Nevers is used for a mix of recreational activities by mixed demographic. Some of the specific activities include softball leagues, the annual Island Fair, loose recreational activity, beach access. The playground is used by visiting children, as well as several other activities that we can talk about later. These are a few historical photos from a packet advertising the Tom Nevers Lodge in the early 1900s. These are just interesting to see, but you can see in the top photo there is a train station for public access out to the site. And then below, there's a picture of the Tom Nevers Lodge as it was. This last photo is significant because you can see the extent of the beach from the bluff during this time. It was so much larger and the bluff was a lot taller. So this is the 1995 reuse plan that Horiuchi and Solian Landscape Architects proposed. It's pretty similar to the layout of Tom Nevers as it is today. There's just a few things were put in different places and a lot of things on this plan were never actually built. The red lines on here denote where the top bank is today and the shoreline is today. So you can see just in 20 years how much the shoreline has changed and gone into their plan of what they had.
So this is the new line, right? If you go back, this is the new shoreline now.
Yeah, this is the old shoreline, and the top of the bank is this dotted line, or that's the bottom. This is the top of the bank, and then this is the new shoreline, and the new top of the bank is the dashed line. Pretty significant. This is a diagram of the existing program on the site, so we'll just go through it briefly so we have a common understanding of what it's used for. So we have the baseball field here, the softball field, the demolition derby circle. This is the bunker and the fairgrounds. Then we have a mixed-use pavement. We have the playground here with the bathrooms located just above. This is the roller hockey rink. And then this is dirt parking. This is a dirt bike track down here with more dirt parking and beach access. This is a storage metal warehouse. Up here is Conservation Foundation land. And here is Nantucket Housing Authority land. And here is actually Land Bank. So we have a lot of different organizations abutting the property. So this property is a vast site with ocean views from almost all points of it. Therefore, I want to highlight some of these existing open views and the potential to enhance them. These three photos are from 3 different locations on site that are vantage points to the ocean, but they're also obstructed by leftover pavement and infrastructure. In this top photo, you can see that it's a really beautiful, ideal view. That's from one corner of the park. But then these two, they have pavement, and it could be so much beautiful with remediated vegetation and everything. There's an existing bathroom structure on site where the bathrooms are fully functioning, yet very low maintained both internally and externally. The location of the bathrooms are located in the center of the facilities, but also in the center of the property. And this neglect is creating an unsafe environment for the park. So the bunker is a historical aspect of this site because it was originally created as a hideout for JFK during the Cold War. Now it's gone through a series of different uses. It's been used as the Navy's locker room for their football team, for storage, and the Hunting Association was using it for a long time. And now it's no more than a novelty for this site, with a picturesque opening and hilly topography with a view from the top of it. So these softball and baseball fields are heavily used by leagues and occasional visitors. There's a clear gap between maintenance of the site in general, where the sports fields are and where they aren't, and it creates a dissonance on the site, and encouraging unsafe behavior to happen here. So this is a metal warehouse that's used as a storage facility. Right now it's almost completely empty and has sort of lost use on this site. It's a wooden structure with metal framing, and it's in a really ruinous state. So the roller hockey rink is a heavily used facility on this site. It was originally built for hockey, but now it's used for a series of different sports, such as indoor soccer and basketball. Despite its heavy use, it is in a poor state and it's unmaintained. Oops, I don't want to switch yet. It's also an impermeable surface, so it increases runoff and it exacerbates erosion. And it's also vulnerable to falling off of the bluff within our lifetimes. Just below this is the dirt bike track. It's been used for ATV and dirt biking, which has a pretty strong community on the island. But despite this heavy use, it creates problems with ripping up vegetation and loosening sediment, creating it to be more vulnerable to erosion and increasing that chance of happening. Just below there is an exposed ammunition bunker from the old Navy base. And it's an example of some of the infrastructure that's protruding from the cliff and creating a really hazardous environment for beachgoers. The beach access is actually right here where people go down. So the playground is heavily used by visiting children and families, but its exposure to the environments in this site has caused it to be seriously rusting, and kids are playing on it and cutting themselves, and it's really dangerous, so it needs to be addressed. And on that note, this site in general is in a really ruinous condition. There's leftover concrete foundations, vandalism, and leftover infrastructure scattered throughout the site. It creates an unfriendly environment for the site and again, provides for unsafe behavior. One of the most defining factors of this site is the rapid erosion along the coast. This top picture is again the location of the worst part of erosion, with pavement crumbling over the side of the bluff. There are also foundations sticking out over the cliff and wires sticking out from leftover foundations. And this is from when a lot of the Navy buildings were removed on this site, but they neglected to take out the actual foundations and electrical underneath. So this diagram lays out what is happening with the erosion on site. The average rate is about -9 feet per year, but you can see from this diagram that erosion is episodic. So some years you might lose nothing, or the coast might grow, and other years you might lose more than you ever have. So it's hard to gauge what will happen. It all depends on weather patterns and conditions like that. So this white line is a projected coastline for the year 2080 in 63 years. And this is from historical records as well as increasing erosion from climate change. So in this period, we're projected to lose approximately -350 feet, all in my timeline and our children's timeline. This hatched area represents impermeable surfaces on the site. And what's happening is when rain falls on the impermeable surfaces, instead of impermeating into the ground, it's running off and creating a big concave where this erosion is happening. So it's increasing the erosion. So without removal of this pavement, the erosion will be severely increased. This is a diagram of vegetation. The existing vegetation on the site is minimal due to previous use from a Navy base, as well as exposure to the environment there. And there's a mix of mowed lawn as well as native plant communities scattered throughout, and there's a strong dune system along the coast with beach pea, that's a good nitrogen fixer, as well as dune grass, that's good for erosion control. And this strong system does indicate that in the past few years, erosion has slowed down on this site, but it doesn't indicate that it won't get worse in future years. Here are a few examples of vegetation on the site. The top photo is beach pea and dune grass. The middle photo is native meadow. The bottom photo is the few trees that are on site that are very warped from the environment and wind. Here's a diagram of the microclimate. This is based on the wind. So the wind rose indicates that during the months from June through August, during the summer, when the park is most heavily used, the winds are primarily from the south and southwest. So on here, there are pockets of protection and pockets of exposure based on topography and vegetation. So in this upper hand corner, a dip in topography behind the bunker creates a protection from the wind, whereas on top of the bunker, you're more exposed to the elements. So to just summarize what we've just gone through, I want to highlight some of the main issues we hope to focus on with this project. These are erosion, deteriorating infrastructure, and disorganization of program. And some of our main goals for this project are to embrace a dynamic landscape, care for the space we own as a community, provide a beautiful and safe place to recreate, create a master plan considering our resources at hand, and design a place that benefits our community as a whole. So we believe the best way to carry out this project is to create phases. So with our previous goals in mind, we created a phasing outline for how this may play out. So currently we're transitioning between 1 and 2 with public outreach and coming up with our first schematic plan. So this is our first version of a schematic plan, and it's entirely a concept of what this place could potentially be if we are to redesign it. We've rerouted the entrance road towards the back and followed along to keep all the same access points. Along the coast, we've removed the pavement and the coastal road and created a bluff block. There will be dirt parking at the end of Tom Nevers Road to access to this bluff block, as well as beach access on the east side of the property. In the center field, we regraded to follow the original valley formation of this landscape. So with a flat field in the middle and inclining on the sides for spectating and picnicking. We've designated a small facility to be here with bathrooms and storage, as well as a playground location that would be built out of organic materials. For the sports fields in the back, we propose to keep the softball field and clean up the west side of the property, creating a mixed-use sport field that could develop into different programs as needed as that time comes. The remaining spaces will all be vegetative remediation, whether it be bayberry mix, a native meadow, or a dune system remediation. And that's our first schematic plan. So with that, we'd like to open up the floor for anyone who'd like to speak. Thank you for listening. Yes.
Hi, yeah. Can you go back to slide 26, which is your phase? Can you give us an idea, in a perfect world, how much time would be associated with each of these phases? Assume that you had a green light, had all the money in the world to make it happen. How long would each of these things take?
We project the entire project to be about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're basically through phase 1, so it's been about a 3-month period. Phase 2, it's really hard to say because it entirely depends on when we can get meetings and when we can get permitting and everything like that. A lot of this will happen overlapping as well, so it's very hard to predict how long each will take, but all will be completed within 5 years and will happen in this order.
Okay, and then following up to that, what would be the total cost of the picture that you showed on number 28? Or I'm sorry, on number 27, the next one?
Yeah.
What would be the total cost to pull off something like this?
Well, with this being a concept, we have not done projected costs, but we do predict it to be within around $1 million or more.
Just $1 million to do all of this?
It could be more.
No, I'm thinking that's unbelievable, reasonable.
Well, a lot of what I'm basing that off of is we have a lot of volunteers who are willing to do a lot of this work. So we're not getting the top of the line companies to come in and do like a perfect job. You know, that's the way that our community works is we all come together and do this. You know, Rob Coletti stood up and volunteered to take all the pavement out, and he would do that free of cost, and recycle the pavement, which would be amazing, you know, and that is a whole big cost that is taken out of that. So that's what I'm basing that on. So we could potentially do this without it being an extremely costly process.
We also had someone volunteer for all the composting that's available, so they could do all the soil with that.
That's Charlie Gifford from Waste Options has volunteered to all the compost and topsoil that we would need.
And I would say you could exclude a facility out of that figure. Like the landscape would be like, I think we could target about $1 million or under, and a facility would be in excess of that, depending on how elaborate the structure.
You're talking the facilities such as the bathrooms and that, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're saying the landscape would be $1 million, facilities on top, but the only facility that do you consider the playgrounds facilities?
The playground is interesting because
But it would be part of that.
it would be part of the landscape, and because what we're looking at is doing an alternative playground that's built out of organic materials, and we actually do have a company, and it would be extremely well costed and like in that line of budget to do that company. Yeah,
What's the name of the company?
it's the Natural Playground Company. I'm serious, that's the name of the company.
But we are thinking, natural materials to play with, sandbox, stone structures, things to run around, roll around in, as opposed to everything is a structure that you buy and that will eventually.
Yeah, no plastic or metal or anything.
Randy, Rich Durber, and I'll let Jeff to explain kind of even why I'm here and what we're talking about, but I think it's really hard to say that it's $1 million project. So my experience having been on Park and Rec and CPC and understanding the complications of digging, refurbing, the town's responsibility. I mean, it can cost $750 to $1 million just to build a couple bathrooms and a small area. So I'm not learned enough to throw a real number on the wall either. But my whiteboard number is closer to 3 million. And I'm not suggesting that $1 million is wrong or that 3 million is right. But I think fundamentally, the conversation about how much might this cost and how do you get it through the town and how do you get it through the DPW and union contracts and all of that is as much a part of the process and the burden as finding money, grants, state, local, private, whatever it is. I think it's going to be an interesting process. I think $1 million is light. I think 3 to 5 years is right.
Do we know what it cost to build the Novadear fields off of Novadear Farm Road?
The football field, although artificial turf, that was 1.2 million. And the building that they're still they continue to talk about for Novadear, where the football field is come in between $750 and $1 million in estimates from the town.
I believe they were given a $5 million grant from private entities for that park.
For which?
For the, where the AstroTurf is, for all the soccer fields. I
I
think
just know
that's
the
the figure
CPC
I
paid
heard.
to build to help fund the
Okay.
AstroTurf field.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
So my name is Howard Dickler. I live in Lions Lane. We're full-time residents for the last 2 years. I'm sorry I haven't been at your earlier meetings. Perhaps it was held when
You're here today.
and the reason I apologize is because I'm going to make a suggestion that's not included here. So for ourselves and for many senior people, the primary mode of recreation is walking. And you might think that there's plenty of walking here on Nantucket, but it's not good walking for seniors. So, for example, the downtown area, the waterfront, whatever you talk about, it's not even stable footing. And there's no measurements so people can judge their progressive fitness. And most importantly, there aren't benches. When you're old, you're subject to muscle fatigue, muscle cramping, joint pain, and having a place to sit every once in a while when you need it is very useful. Now, it could be, I think this is an ideal spot that doesn't really exist anywhere else on the island, because you could have views of the ocean. You could make it a permeable material. It just had to be stable and firm footing. And the kind of benches that the land bank uses, which are made of stone, are practically indestructible, so there's no maintenance.
It's an excellent suggestion.
So I urge giving consideration to
Absolutely.
such.
And Dul, did you want to talk about access at all and what's happening with the bike path, or Randy?
In the coming up in the special town meeting that will happen in November, we as the Tom Nevers Civic Association initiated a warrant to prioritize a Tom Nevers bike path from Milestone Road. And so that will be discussed at the town meeting, and hopefully it will be approved by the citizenry there, which would also tie in nicely with what's happening here. So that is on the warrant. That will be discussed at the special town meeting in November.
And is that, so as the bike path, it's already been approved, right? That they would happen at some point in the future?
Correct.
You're trying to sort of go to the front of the road?
Accelerate it.
Okay.
Correct, that's it,
And-
right?
and
It is
if-
planned for 2027 right now.
Okay.
We are saying that we want it to be the next project after the existing projects that are already under construction are completed. The next one that's begun would be this one.
Okay.
And did they, how far out are you thinking?
That it would happen. After that, we'll have to see. Yeah. But my guess it would be within 2 years, I think is when the next one was. Yeah.
Anyone else have questions or comments or suggestions?
Just
Yeah.
one further comment on the bike path. The way it's currently structured, there would be 2 phases to it. The first phase would extend the bike path from Milestone Road down to Old Tom Nevers Road, the straight shot down there. That is the most expensive because it's the longest. It also involves probably moving the telephone poles. And then once that's done, then phase 2 would continue it all the way down to the park. But the thought was, a lot of people live on the west side and on the east side. You have a lot of pedestrian traffic and you have a lot of bike traffic. And if we could get that first phase in, you'd pick up a lot of that and make it much safer on the road.
Has it been drawn out already, the bike path?
No.
I'm wondering if at one point it might cross the road and get away from the ocean side.
They haven't, as part of the first phase, they would do the actual construction diagram of
Yeah.
where it would go, how wide it would be, what fill they would need, and so on.
The only thing that we're fairly certain about is that it would be going down on the east side of Tom Nevers Road.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, sure.
Rich, would you like to tell us a little bit about?
Come up front this time,
Yes,
if that's okay.
Yeah,
please do.
So it's speaking from the back of the room for last time. Hi, everybody, Rich Turr. On One Island, I manage a consulting company called Nantucket Company. I'm a full-time resident for 5 years. My wife and I were married here by Ted Anderson in '86 in March, yada, 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 all the same stories everybody hears. But I came to the island first on a project that was started by Renee Nantucket, a little controversial. So some of you may be familiar with that, may like some of our findings, and others may be familiar with that, not. But we had a steering committee of 14 or 16 people, lasted for a year. It was a really interesting project. It was fascinating for me because I've always been a private sector guy. I'm mostly a marketing guy. Along the way and through that, and being in a ton of town meetings, I had an opportunity to join Park and Recreation and then become the representative for Park and Rec on the CPC. And I did both of those for about a year and a half. And then in 2016, I took a consultancy and was mostly off island, although my wife is here. And so I had to resign both of those positions, but I loved it, and I'm jealous Cheryl would all work with you. So along the way, there was a lot of visibility about what's happened to Park and Recreation. Matter of fact, that started in the Remain project. I became aware that Park and Rec became defunded. I think it was in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And their last budget was $400,000. But Park and Recreation on Nantucket went to zero-based budgeting in 2012. And if you rewind 2007 and 2008, when the world changed, whether you were in business or you were a town, everybody was frightened about the economy, right? So there was a lot of merging and purging of organizations. So to be empathetic to Libby and the Board of Selectmen, why wouldn't the DPW pick up the responsibility of emptying garbage, raking beaches, and things like that? Makes sense on paper, right, if you're trying to save some money. The reality is there's not a voice and there's not an eye for town-owned parks and recreation anymore. And it continues to be a problem on Nantucket. So the question when we talk about Tom Nevers, and I'll get to that in a second, is do we believe that, and when will the right funding, the right oversight, the right mechanisms for town-owned parks and recreational projects start to be seeded and funded again? I'm of a prejudiced opinion that it's one of the least priorities on the island right now. So the land bank has some beautiful properties that they've been able to recover. They had a partnership to make the Belvedere Fields happen. That's kind of everybody's money, right? That comes out of the land bank funds and gets repurposed. The CPC helped fund Belvedere. They get some matching funds from the state, but that also helps the town spend less money. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Spend less money to get things done because they get matching grants. But I don't want to speak for the land bank, but having had lots of meetings with them along the way too, I'm not so sure that the land bank or the current commissioners of the land bank have a want to take over every single park on island and have that responsibility. I'm not speaking for them, but I'm not so sure that was determined either. So now we have town-owned parks. Mill Hill, Tom Nevers, Children's Beach and Jetties probably get the most attention because they're A, historic district, and B, they're more exposed to an important population, which is tourism here. So they get a little more attention. But the other parks really don't. When I was at Park and Rec, I guess there was an outdoor exercise facility in Mill Hill that was falling apart and dangerous. So I don't even know, Cheryl, if it's been taken out, but I know 2.5 years ago they talked about having to take it out.
They never maintained it.
Okay, I know the playground here, which isn't that old, but the one that was put in is rusty and dangerous, and there's been issues there as well. So when you start to think about, I know this is a Tom Nevers conversation, but what's starting to happen, and it's in the most early stages, and Cheryl has been fantastic at trying to make this happen too, is there's something called Nantucket CPR. That's cute. What was the natural thing called? The playground.
The natural playground.
Natural playground. I think Nantucket CPR is a little cuter. So it's Nantucket, but it's community park and recreation. And it's not a model that's also unique. It's being done in towns and towns and towns everywhere, where you combine public and private funding to take care of parks that are nearest to you, right? And they don't have to be big projects. They can be small beautification projects. And there's still complications because Libby has to manage, union contracts and all of that. So when you start taking away jobs and responsibilities from people that are on contract to give it to local community and people that aren't, that's more complicated than I understand still today, but it's complicated. So coming in and doing work on town-owned property where DPW and other employees, local, state, others should be doing the work is just complicated. But that's not to suggest that there hasn't been tremendous success with these community organizations or community park and recreation. So we are just filing paperwork. There's 5 or 6 people that are trying to make this happen, 501c3, and it could be as simple as fixing rotaries and plantings and others, or maybe even building things on parks, and maybe even getting involved with Tom Nevers, and I'll talk about that in a second. So it's community park and recreation, and I'm not sure, I think we'll have a sign-up sheet or something here. We would love your emails if we don't already have it. I'm sure we'll abuse the privilege. Don't send us into your junk mail right away. And we're gonna try to get that thing nurtured a little bit. And everybody so far has put in a couple $100 just to do the legal and to do the final. But it'll be a not-for-profit before it's a non-profit, because getting 501c3 status takes sometimes 2 years. And we've talked to Margaretta and everybody in Community Foundation of Nantucket. That may be an angle for us, or it may not be. So that's Nantucket CPR, and we're still working on a logo as well. Now, rewinding again, if I'm taking too much time, because I can be pretty verbose. But also during my Remain project, I had reached out and built a relationship with, at the time, the Bloomberg administration, which is now Bloomberg Philanthropies. And what they had done in New York City is they had merged all of these disparate organizations that were in charge of tourism and all of that into kind of one entity, right? If you think about Bloomberg and his business mind, that's what they did. And a guy named George Fertitta he was in charge of it, spent a lot of time with me at the time, which was fantastic, and tried to help us along and said, what we did in New York is very scalable for Nantucket. As a matter of fact, one of the attorneys that worked for them, summers here, and was familiar with Children's Beach and everything. So somewhere along the way, they talked about a conservancy. I'm like, what's a conservancy, right? And so 4 years ago, I started looking at the conservancy model. I so happen to be of the opinion that the Tom Nevers space is the perfect space on Nantucket to look into forming a conservancy. So if you haven't gone on to the New York Central Park Conservancy website, it's a 10-minute video that was co-produced by Columbia University. It is fascinating. And I know sometimes, it's hard for people to say this is Nantucket, it's not New York. I get it. But watch the video, and every time they say New York or New York City, force yourself to put Nantucket in the sentence, right? Because everything that they were faced with in the 70s when Central Park, you couldn't go in at nighttime, its nickname was Needle Park, it was really dangerous, it was horrific and embarrassing, and now it's the 10th wonder of the world, right? It's amazing. 75% of all their funding comes from private citizens and corporations. So that's the Central Park Conservancy.
And they have a partnership with the city. The city has not turned over.
Right, and you see that in the video. One of the early things is, oh gosh, how can New York City give up their ownership of the park? The city still owns the park. Effectually, the Conservancy is a nonprofit contractor that wins the contract, is able to take in private money and corporate money. And because of that, they also don't have to use all of New York City's very expensive labor. We've all heard stories of toll takers in New York City that make $130,000 a year, right? So Nantucket has the same dilemma, right? We're paying temporary labor to take boats to come to mow the lawn in the summertime, and we pay them $16, $18, $19 an hour. Kind of similar, right? So if you have to follow the city rules, it can be really expensive to get anything done. If you can find a path that lets you think differently, bring in some private sector thinking, some private sector funding, some private sector management, then suddenly you can get a lot more done for less money. Now the city still pays, 25% of the budget is still paid for the city, but it's incredibly efficient. We've all seen in movies the police on horseback. They're not city police. They're paid for and managed by the Conservancy, to give you an example. It's really kind of fascinating. So I ask everybody to look at the Conservancy model. And I think Tom Nevers is the perfect conservancy discussion. So when the question, Randy, is how long would it take in 3 to 5 years? I think it's 3 years of town meetings, yelling and screaming at each other, figuring out why this makes sense, who's going to fund it, where do the grants come from, and if you build it, the problem is, my experience in the last 5 years, when the town builds something, there's no manpower and there's no money to manage and maintain it. So if they spent $1 million, $2 million, $3 million to build something pristine, I don't have confidence, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's a really hard place to manage stuff on Nantucket with three months of season and 9 months of not, right? But I don't have confidence that if you build beautiful parks, beautiful recovered grass, wonderful wood walkways, a great walking path too. I used to walk around Tom Nevers all the time. I'm amazed to see barbed stuff sticking up from the road, and I still have decent ankles, and it's hard to walk in the roads that they have there, right? But I can't envision that spending, let's say, town money and then managing it correctly would be done to everybody's satisfaction. But if there was citizens and stakeholders and summer influencers and other people that funded it and set up an organization, it could be fantastic. And my prejudice that this notion that we keep moving fields and ball fields into these undescript areas over near the airport. I think people that live here all year or retire here and live here all year, kids, families, this is the spot. I understand that it's not the best place to play tennis or basketball with the wind. It's probably not the best place to play baseball. But where else in the world can you be playing baseball or basketball with the view on Tom Nevers Field instead of putting people in nondescript areas near the airport for land that otherwise wouldn't have been used a lot? We could be living in Revere, or any other town and have that experience. Why wouldn't we want to have the experience? Now, that's what a conservancy model could be. And I'm a big fan of it. But even just yesterday at the Board of Selectmen meeting, what is Nantucket CPR? What's going on at Tom Nevers? Everybody's really confused because we're all doing this part-time. It's a few weeks here and there. Nobody owns this process. It's a hard process. I don't know how to fix that, right? So the town's confused. I talked to Libby about this 4 years ago, right? Interesting. We'd love to have private money to fix and make everything beautiful, but it's complicated. It's not a priority, right? It's complicated and it's not a priority. And I understand that when you have our island falling into the sea, we have sewage problems, water issues, and everything else. I get it. I'll say this because when I keep hearing about the bike path, I mentioned in the last meeting, if I'm in a butter, if I live in Tom Nevers, I kind of might like the idea that this place is crappy because I don't want it to be used, right? So if it's crappy and it's not appealing and people don't come, if I'm in a butter, that might be appealing to me. I kind of understand that. But when I'm hearing this conversation about bike paths, unless it's purely for convenience because you hate driving around bikes like we all do, 3 months out of the year, it's good for me to hear that you guys are talking about having a bike path down there because those two ideas conflict. You don't build a bike path if you're trying to limit or restrict humanity down at Tom Nevers. So I hope you don't pull your town meeting piece. But a bike path suggests that there's this want to make it accessible and to make it right and make it convenient. Now, my other abutter conversation is if I had a beautiful property that was managed well, that was policed, that the garbage was empty, that I would send my grandchild in, I don't have one yet, but hopefully I'm close, send my grandchild in to use the toilets, right? That maybe is good for my property value and other things. So I could speak both sides of that argument, I think, pretty well, and I understand that conflict. But community park and recreation, Nantucket CPR, we're just starting, and we love emails, and we're trying to figure things out. This thing is a really big thing. And I had conversations with the CEO and others 2 or 3 years ago at Central Park Conservancy. I wrote down the woman's name because she wasn't part of it before, and this is not, this is back in the wrong way. Mila, not Mila, Mila Brogan, who's the VP of Institute of Urban Parks, which is part of that. She's coming next Tuesday, and we're going to have a meeting of 8 to 10 people. She's not coming just for us. She's coming because she was coming. And I reached out and said, I'm going to be on island. Isn't that fantastic? Let's get together with some stakeholders. So I don't want to take credit. CPR doesn't want to take credit for her flying in and staying overnight. She's meeting somebody else that she knows here. But Tuesday morning, she's going to have, spend a couple hours with us. And we're still trying to figure out who's best to attend. Randy, I know you're going to attend. Dual, I think you can, or you're going to be there as well. So we'll have 2 from the association. And then Cheryl and I are still trying to figure out how many town people. Can we get Eric Sabetsky from the land bank? Can we get a Board of Selectmen or two, at what point do we break open meeting laws and we have to hang a flag and post something? We don't know any of that yet. So we have to be careful with how big it is and who attends. But she's gonna be here. And they will help us through the process, for a fee, and it's still kind of new for them. But like the Bloomberg administration, and now Bloomberg Philanthropies is helping cities all across the world do amazing different stuff. The Central Park Conservancy is really interested.
It's part of their mission.
Is really interested in helping cities, but communities, look at the conservancy model. So, thank you for letting me do that. I hope we do get email addresses, and if there's new questions, I'll do the best I can to answer them. But I think it's 3 to 5 years. I think it's $3 million plus, and I don't think the town can do it. And I don't mean for that to sound negative at all. Nantucket is known for doing amazing things, right? First town in the United States to do a land bank, although we stole it from Canada. Right? But so this is an island that's always proud of firsts. This could be a first, And if it's Tom Nevers' first, then maybe there can be an historic one downtown that's combines the jetties and Children's Beach, as well. So there should be one conservancy for the island. There should be conservancies that focus on parts of the community where abutters in the neighborhood have an enhanced interest.
And if Lincoln Circle had a group of people that were interested in doing some improvement there, because of the same thing, split rail and, around the park, it was eroding people parking and,
Is that Brand Point?
No, it's,
Lincoln's
Lincoln's
Sorry.
on top of Cobblestone Hill.
Oh, okay.
And so I had drawn something for them and, but it seems to just, I looked at it this year and it just seems to be in the same state that, there was definitely people that were willing to foot the bill for that. So I don't know what happened with that.
Yeah, and there's this funny balance, when you talk about fixing your beautification, right? We don't want Nantucket to look like Disney.
Yeah.
So when I see streets downtown that have weeds growing all over the place in the middle of the summer, I always think it could be better, but I think I have an appropriate view that, not everything should be perfect and deep green and cut and manicured either. So what's the right balance? I think what you folks have done, talking about recovering a third of the property to really look like natural seashore and grasses and stuff like that is, first of all, that feels exactly right to me, but it also feels exactly necessary.
Right. We
with
want to talk about
pending erosion.
We want to talk about improvement more than beautification.
Right.
Or like improve what's there. And also the legacy should not be like a high sort of maintenance type place. We want to keep it so that it makes sense. We're not just throwing resource after resource after resource to this space, but something that's manageable. So that's kind of, what's guiding, where we might go with the design.
So how many in the room did I scare by saying some of this stuff? Anybody? No? Really? Okay. You should be a little bit, right? If you're interested, this is really hard stuff.
Just as a point of understanding for me, what was the model that was followed for the park and playground in Wisconsin?
That's land bank.
So that's land.
So that's land bank. So their state charter with the island, recreation is in fact part of it. So unlike I always say it wrong, it's the Conservation
Commission?
Trust. Sorry?
Foundation.
Sorry, I get that wrong all the time now for 5 years, I apologize. So, and this isn't exactly right either, but they want to conserve land, but really don't promote a lot of humanity on it, right? That's an extreme way of saying it, and I get it, and there's a reason for that. That's exactly the opposite of the land bank. So they promote access, humanity, and recreation as part of it. So that's how they were able to get that through, albeit controversial again for the abutters. It was a playground, it was a crappy playground, and they, with their charter, said we're gonna go in and fix it again. But if I'm next to it, I'd rather have nobody running around, than have 50 people running around, I guess. I understand that.
Just 2 seconds. The land bank takes tax money, so of course they're going to promote public access. The foundation doesn't take tax money. So that's a different in there.
No, that's right.
Okay.
No, I even know that.
So, yeah, I know, I just.
I don't mean in a bad way.
No.
I've been in so many town meetings, and for the first year I was here about the dog park controversy and
Yeah,
all of
well,
those
I
things.
just, you know, I.
No, but thank you for that. Thank you for that. They both serve an amazing purpose on
Right,
the island.
they do.
You should be really proud of it. So, anyway, I'm done. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put me in the front of the room. It's just bad.
So we do have a sign-up sheet. If you haven't already signed in, we'd love to be able to stay in touch. And if there's no other question, that will conclude.
And we'd love to get the surveys back. Either you can mail them in if you.
Is there a mailing address?
You told me, no, but you did not include the concept plan in our packets, was that intentional?
We created the packets before we completed the concept plan. So is that available? Well, we can email, if you sign in with your name and email on this, we will email you with notes from this meeting and the concept plan.
And for the survey, we want to mail it to 53 Pleasant Street. 53 Pleasant.